This next session, as I'm going to invite Carla, Sarah, and Ivan up to the stage with me, is one that I've been looking forward to the most. Not saying that everyone else's I looked forward to less, but this was one of the first sessions that I kind of conceptualized when it came to Parcel Unpacked. And it was just that we all got into email in really different ways, and we're all here in this community together. So hello to all the speakers that have just joined me. I'm going to pull up our slides. Okay, so hello everyone, even though I've already said that. Welcome to this next session, Navigating the Nonlinear Path. I think many of us can really resonate with the statement that we've landed in email, right? I personally did my bachelor's degree in political science, which shouldn't surprise anyone. It has really nothing to do with email, unless I'm obviously working for Action Rocket on their BBC email. But when reflecting on my gratitude for this community, I really reflect on like the how did I get here question. And I'm continually grateful for being here despite having no straight path to it. So I hope that's something many of you in the audience feel similar towards. I'm really excited to introduce Sarah, Ivan, and Carla to you today. Each of these individuals I've connected with are tied to email development in really unique ways and provide three unique perspectives to really whether you're thinking of transitioning into email, navigating away from it, or following kind of the path forward for the foreseeable future. So the structure of today's panel is going to follow questions we've highlighted ahead of time, similar to Ted's chat. And while the discussions progress, please drop any questions you have for any of the speakers or all three of them into the chat, and I will weave them through. So I'll invite each of them to introduce themselves now and talk us through briefly how they landed in email. Sarah, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sarah Gallardo. I'm a lead developer at Oracle Marketing Consulting. I think I touched my first email in like 2008, 2009. I was actually working a temp job for a web developer who used Cold Fusion and built websites and newsletters for bluegrass bands. He had no patience for like my divs and style sheets, which was super frustrating at the time because he basically made me build everything in tables. So sometimes I had to like move stuff from like proper development to tables. So that was really frustrating, but at the same time has worked out pretty well for me. I had been taking some online dev classes forever ago, ran out of money. I was a single parent when the recession hit, so it was like a really rough time for me. So I kind of started just cruising the W3C site and a bunch of other random resources to kind of figure out enough code to work at that initial temp job. So sometime and a whole bunch of odd jobs later, the economy started picking up and I wanted to kind of level up my career, so to speak. So I put together a whole fantastic portfolio with design, development chops, very proud of myself. And then the headhunter that I was showing this off to, her like eyes started glazing over. So instead of like giving my kind of prepared slick speech, you know, about how great I am, I started panicking. And so I started kind of throwing everything I had at the wall, you know, like, oh, I can do photo manipulation. I can do data entry, you know, like I was like so desperate to like get something that I just started like throwing things. And then like literally as she was like pushing me out the door, I was like, oh, I can code emails. Like, yes, I can do that. And she was, and at that time I had done maybe like 5 emails in my life, but it was like a thing I could do, right? So then she like stops dead in her tracks and she's like, email? Oh, I have a job for you. And I have not had a email job since. Like I've been all in on email. And I know that like a lot of us like to say that, you know, email chose us or whatever. And I think that's definitely true for me. But like on the same token, like email kept my family housed and fed and alive, you know, for the last 10 plus years. And for that, like email has my like ultimate loyalty in trying to, you know, make it better.
Well, thank you. We are so glad that you're with us in email, and you've been a fantastic participant so far in Parcel Unpacked. So I appreciate you being here with us. Ivan, I will pass the mic over to you to introduce yourself. I've just prompted an unmute for you.
Howdy. My name is Ivan Hurd, and I got into email by accident. I was a PC technician for about 20 years, and due to some health reasons, I had to change careers. And I eventually started as a web content editor and then moved to an email developer.
Great. Well, we are very excited that you're here, and you have quite a nice following in the chat right now that are also very happy that you're speaking with us. So thank you for being here. Carla, I will pass the mic over to you now to introduce yourself and explain how you got into email.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So I started in coding when I was back in high school. I had always been really interested in technology, and one of my classes just kind of allowed me to try some coding. And since then, it just kind of grew from there. I got my first job as an email specialist, and so I was working on all of the emails in-house for a company. And eventually I kind of just grew comfortable doing that. So I started exploring a little bit more on what else email could do. So I started looking at best practices and how we could incorporate those into our marketing strategy, and the different types of emails we were sending and how they played the part in different marketing campaigns. And eventually that just kind of naturally led me into looking at different features within the marketing automation platform we were using, to a point where I just became the admin. And then after that, I was still really interested in learning and exploring more. So I expanded more into marketing operations, which is where I am at now. And so I have been able to transfer some of those skills that I picked up as an email marketer and transfer them onto different tools in the marketing tech stack. And I also can take a look at our marketing campaigns and help optimize some of the processes and explain the value that marketing operations brings to the business, to stakeholders, or other marketers.
Thank you for all you do. As a marketing operations person, I appreciate ops every day. Thank you for being here. All right, first question of our AMA. Sarah, this one's for you. You've had the most experience in email development out of this group. Can you tell us how you've noticed development changing over the years, aside from new inboxes and operating systems? What advice do you have for those in our audience keen to understand how to remain up to speed with changes in our space?
Sure. So email changes a lot. I feel like it really kind of changes pretty drastically every couple years. If it's not how you're coding, it's the email clients that you're kind of guiding towards. There's really kind of a lot that changes. I think if you're like, even if you're in an agency or something like that, like there's kind of always a reorg happening or some kind of like major shift in kind of how that process works too. So I actually feel like I have like 5 like kind of guidelines that I try to stick to as a developer. So my first one, kind of related, the only constant is change. I think that a major important part of being a developer in this industry is being super flexible. There's no hard lines here, like try to figure out what you can do for a client when they're asking for it. Just always be ready for whatever new thing is coming up, because there will always be something new. And then the second one would be get curious. So yeah, like dig into all the cool stuff. Like some of these videos from Mark are amazing at doing that, kind of showing you the ropes on how to get in there. If you get stumped, ask questions, reach out to the community. And then I also like to say kind of like test against those answers too. So like if you're trying to figure something out, someone might give you an answer, but sometimes it's worth just kind of like testing that answer to make sure it's really doing what you want. Then I like to say, like, there's no right way. And I know I've seen this in a couple parts of the chat over the last few days too, but like, there's no right way to code. If you are only coding one way, you are going to be obsolete when that next 2-year cycle comes through. So I would want my developers, my team, to kind of be able to jump into any code that exists. And that's super important. You're not going to recode an entire email just because it's not the way you want it to be. Like another way to kind of think about that is like, so for instance, there's like at least 6 different ways to code a button. And each of those 6 ways has their pros and cons. And part of being a good developer is not just knowing how to code a button, but also understanding what the needs of that specific email are to be able to give it the right button or CTA. I also like to say trust but verify. Like there's a lot of information out there about email at this point, like a whole lot more than there used to be. And there's also like a lot of bad information out there. So never take something at face value, always kind of dig into it, reevaluate things and kind of see where they're going. And then also you make mistakes. There's no room for ego on this. If someone alerts you to a rendering error or a problem, look into it. Don't just say, oh, that's fine, my code is perfect, because that's not true. And then this last one I feel like is really important, but like don't compare yourself to others, which is really hard to do. Like, especially like when you're seeing conferences like this and there's so many like amazing developers doing all this really crazy stuff. And that's awesome. Obviously, like escalating the game is really important. But if you are someone like me, a solo parent, or maybe you have a chronic illness or any number of obstacles that keep you from being a 24/7 developer all the time, like that's okay. I think it's easy to feel like you're falling behind or that there's not a place for you, but I kind of wanted to say like there is a place for you. And so kind of like center yourself on that, grow from your own kind of source of truth and what inspires you and what's interesting to you, and kind of go from there. And there will be kind of just doors that will open naturally from your own passion and interest. So yeah, that's my advice.
I love that. No, that's fantastic. The no room for ego and being open to change is amazing advice. And I think probably something we can all remind ourselves frequently. It's hard to not kind of lean into those two. So thank you. Ivan, you have recently transitioned into email development. What were your biggest challenges in navigating and learning a new field?
One of the biggest challenges was finding all the information to get started. When I first started as a PC tech, there was like organizations like Comptiva that gave you like a detailed background of how to become a PC tech. But with email development, I went to different websites and there were a lot of different resources. And some of them worked, some of them were out of date. The good thing is that there was a few places where I did learn the email geek community. Coding Phase, he's a YouTuber who talks about email development, and a few different YouTube channels. But the hardest thing was just getting started. It wasn't so much the code, but it was getting started. Like, what does an email developer does? Because not too many people talk about it. Most people talk about web development.
Yeah, that resonates. And how did you scale and find career opportunities once you kind of did have the basics under your belt and move past tutorials? How did you kind of go from tutorial to active project? You have a strong YouTube presence. One could say that acts as a great portfolio in addition to being a great learning resource for those in the community. How has the community response been? Has it aided your professional successes?
Yes, it actually has. I have a YouTube channel, and I started the YouTube channel because I really didn't see too much about what an email developer does on a day-to-day basis. So I kind of make videos about like some of the jargon that might be used as an email developer. And by doing that, it's made me dig deeper into learning this as a craft. Because the last thing I want to do is go on YouTube and tell people wrong information. So I double and triple check and spend hours researching a lot of stuff. And I was able to scale and find career opportunities by just I went out and did jobs on Fiverr. I went to I go to like a farmer's market. I told anyone who would listen, hey, I'm an email developer. Do you want me to set up your email? Most people said no, but eventually a local coffee shop and a few other people said, yeah, I'll give you a shot. I did it for free. I also did volunteer work online, helping nonprofits.
It's great, like word of mouth, really, right? Your YouTube presence has been fantastic. And then you're out there promoting yourself and you're saying, here's what I do, here are my capabilities. And I think if you talk about it, people are going to listen. So that is fantastic. Okay, next up, Carla, you have had a great career journey. When we first spoke in December, you mentioned that it was in high school that you originally picked up development through creating a website. You're now working as a marketing operations manager. Can you tell us a bit how prior development experience has set you up for success in your current role and how you kind of still use development in your day-to-day?
Yeah. So, like we've mentioned, I kind of started coding back in high school, and it was a little bit more focused on web development. But that's really what kind of helped get me that job. The first company I kind of landed an email job was looking for someone that could help with their email development. And, I'm sure as we all know, email sometimes seems like it's its own little coding world. And I was able to pick up a lot of those coding skills just being there. And, it was in-house. So a lot of the templates we were just kind of updating or reusing. And I eventually did grow comfortable just coding those same emails. So I started expanding a little bit more on what email did overall for marketing, and understood, the email strategy, best practices, how implementing those really helped our campaigns. And then eventually I started understanding better list segmentations and how that played a part in the marketing automation platforms, and just different features, until I really understood the marketing automation platform and was able to become an admin. And again, after I kind of grew comfortable in that role, I was ready to keep learning and exploring more. And I really think having that development background was really helpful to kind of help me make that next jump into marketing operations. Because in marketing operations, you look at so many different platforms and tools in the marketing tech stack. And so having the ability to go in and take a look at the backend or the code of all of these different platforms and projects, it gave my peers and managers confidence that I could take on all of these different projects and kind of move out of just being an email. So ultimately, yeah, having this experience and background in coding and email development has helped me with every role, because in marketing operations, ultimately, it comes down to really understanding the tools, how they work, how they communicate, and a lot of that still happens in the back end. And as I took on different roles, I was able to really understand all of these different platforms, and now I can translate that into different stakeholders for them to understand the value of marketing operations, platforms, or just provide recommendations for our marketing campaigns or processes.
Definitely. And when we were talking, we lightly touched on no-code tools. They're kind of crazy all over the internet right now, right? The future of tech stacks. Coming from a developer background, now in a marketing ops role, how do you see no-code tools as beneficial not saying they're negative, and where do developers still need to be involved while using them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, yeah, I definitely agree that no-code, low-code tools are very beneficial for marketers. We are all using them. I use them on a probably daily basis. And I definitely think that a lot of these tools help streamline a lot of the processes so that some of these, campaigns or where emails need to be are not bottlenecked by just one or two people who have a very specific skill of getting these emails updated. But like everything in tech, and especially with these being so new overall to the market, they still present certain limitations. And I think that's where developers can really come in and show their value. A lot of these no-code, low-code tools can be really helpful for setting up all the basics so that developers don't have to go in and make changes to images and copy and links, but instead they can focus on more interesting projects or staying ahead of the curve, learning, how to use all of these skills that they already have on different projects. Like I said, coding, and development are really at the core of what helped me kind of expand from emails to marketing automation and then to marketing operations. And part of the reason I've been able to do that is because some of these tools started coming up. And so I was able to decrease the time I was working on updating the copy for an email and focus a little bit more on other projects that were interesting and just a little bit more complex that these tools are not quite ready to handle yet.
Yep, got to work with the tools we're given, as Anne said in the comments. Okay, Sarah, next question to you. Kind of on the note of teams and tech stacks, you currently work as a lead developer. What does a successful team look like to you? Speaking to developers in the audience, if you have any words of wisdom for processes or how to work with others, I think that'd be great for the audience to hear them.
Sure. So I'll say one of the things that I love the most about working in an agency setting is the camaraderie. Like we're all working towards the same goal, but also like, I don't remember, I think we have 5 or 6 developers at Oracle in our department that are all kind of focused on the same thing, but like they also have their own strengths and weaknesses, like, so there's people that are really great at interactivity, there's people that are really great at documentation, and kind of having all of that together means that there's less pressure on you to know and do everything, which is fantastic because that also gives you the freedom to focus in on the things that you really like. So for me, like I'm super excited and passionate about accessibility, and Oracle has a dedicated accessibility team with native screen reader users. So actually being able to talk to them about how they use email and kind of what their specific hindrances are to accessing emails and kind of a lot of the stuff that we're doing every day and kind of how that experience is for them is really amazing. I've learned so much at my time in Oracle just kind of focusing on accessibility. And then I think, like, for me, one of the things that I think when I zoom out and really think about what makes a successful developer successful, it is really the ability to communicate. So like, yes, I want you to be able to code an email. Obviously, that's important. But I think more important is the ability to communicate to the broader team or clients in a way that they are able to understand. So not having all of the technical jargon perfectly is not as important as being able to kind of speak to why a certain solution may or may not be a right fit for this particular email campaign. And I think like having that basic understanding of the different roles and parts of an agency is really important, right? Because you want your team to be able to ask you questions without feeling like they are, a hindrance or that, they're really dumb. But like most of the questions that we get answered are maybe easy, but not particularly challenging. But being able to kind of explain that is super important. I also think being able to communicate in code is important too. So at least in like the agency settings that I've been in, like we break down the whole process of email production into these kind of smaller pieces. So you'll have someone who codes, someone who kind of does the scripting and dynamic portions, someone else who will QA, and someone else who would deploy. And some of those people are on the other side of the world and are, working while you're asleep. So making sure that you have, really simple and clear communication within your code helps people be able to make those last minute changes that they're getting before something has to deploy. So that's a really big deal. And I don't know, I feel like, you could have the most amazing dynamic code in the entire world, just blow them out of the water. But if it's not simple enough for someone else to be able to make a fairly easy change, then that's going to be a problem. So kind of building in some of that flexibility and simplicity into your email is important. And then, I don't know, I think it's a privilege and a responsibility to be in this industry. And I think once you get to a point where you can kind of speak to some of these important parts of email, you really have to. And it's part of that responsibility, and it's very important.
Wise words. Thank you. All right. Oops. Okay. So thinking about where we all are now, I'd love to hear from you three on what's one thing in your journey that you attribute to being pivotal in your career success so far. It could be advice from a former manager, it could be a project you work on, a tool that you use daily. Ivan, I'll start with you.
The one thing that was pivotal for me is finding a mentor. When I started, a buddy of mine, Frank, he started the email development journey like 2 years before I did, and he's been very beneficial in helping me learn email development and manage my career and do the things I do with the YouTube channel.
Do you have any advice for people out there that are currently looking for a mentor? Do you find that maybe a mentor just kind of lands in your circle? Should you actively search out for one? What's your advice on where to find a mentor?
You can actively search out for one, or you can use like YouTube. Like before Frank, when I was learning this, I used Coding Phase and anyone who talked about email development on YouTube as a mentor. But if anyone needs one, I usually answer comments on my channel to try to help people.
Nice, fantastic. Sarah, do you want to go next? What's one thing in your journey that you attribute to being successful?
Sure. So I don't know if this has come through in the other things that I've talked about, but I have kind of considerable crossover between like my personal life and journey and my professional life. And one of those that just absolutely blew my career up was my daughter's dyslexia diagnosis. And then kind of teaching her assistive technology so that she could use it in the classroom. That really kind of really blew my brain right out of the park. I ran an email I had just created through a screen reader, and it was so completely awful. And I was like fairly traumatized from the experience of realizing that I had excluded an entire class of people just by being completely ignorant of the problem. So then I think that there's this sort of like natural process that flows when you kind of have one of those big aha moments of really kind of being able to speak to the advocacy of people's needs that might be different than yours. And a lot of that was also, helping my daughter learn these advocacy skills in her classroom to be able to speak to what she needed. But then kind of taking that again from my personal life to my professional life of being able to kind of really speak to the experiences of using different assistive technologies and kind of what that experience is like for people and how we can kind of best prepare our email campaigns so that they are reaching these people that we haven't really paid attention to in the past, which is awful. And then, like that kind of keeps bouncing off each other, right? Because I think as I'm learning more and working with some nonprofits and advocacy work in the kind of disability dyslexia space, pulling a lot of that information back into the professional space. Like I actually work with a nonprofit that teaches young students how to use assistive technology. That comes in really handy when I'm talking about how people use assistive technology to access their emails. So like just kind of being able to speak to that experience in a professional setting is incredibly important and has turned into like a source of strength for me. Even though at one point I kind of felt like it was maybe sort of embarrassing that, there's all this stuff built up in me with disability and kind of the idea of inclusion. So yeah, I can't not talk about accessibility anymore.
No, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Hands-on experience and just general awareness can be completely pivotal to how we shape our journey moving forward. So thank you. Carla, last but not least, you can finish it off. What is one thing that you define as pivotal in your career success?
Yeah. Well, first, I need to agree with Ivan. I think having mentors and coaches has been a very huge part of my success. But I guess another thing is just being vocal. Like if I know something that might seem obvious to me, does not mean it's obvious to the rest of the team or other people. So obviously, we're in email day in and day out, and likely our networks, we see all of these things, and so we consume all this content that for us might be a little bit more like a daily basis, but other people are not consuming it. So kind of as I was growing in my email role, I started to realize that, oh, that's a best practice. We're not implementing it. Well, maybe I should say something. And just kind of, making sure that you are comfortable around your peers and managers to say, hey, maybe this is something we should be doing or shouldn't be doing. Like Sarah said, so many people don't think about accessibility or inclusivity the same way other people do. And so just being able to speak to that and just having the courage to speak.
Courage is incredibly hard to gather sometimes, but I would agree being able to have that courage to speak up in front of your team or people you don't know very well can be completely pivotal. So I want to thank all three of you for coming today. We do have one question for the audience. If anyone wants to pick this one up, from Warren, any suggestions on how to enter development for the first time? Can it be done as a side hustle at first and then to full time? Currently, I developed my own website and email campaign. Does anyone have any words of wisdom for Warren on how to enter email development for the first time? Don't all go at once.
I can speak to my experience. I feel like is pretty unique. Like I started so long ago, and sometimes I really kind of have to struggle to think about how completely different the experience of being a junior email developer is now than it was when I started. So I think like for me, it is a lot of kind of maybe doing some of that side hustle. Like I loved Ivan's points about, offering free services to people, volunteering. I still do stuff on the side for fun for the nonprofits that I talked about earlier. But I think that's a really good way to kind of like sharpen your skills and kind of start to learn some of those both development skills and kind of like soft people skills of kind of how to make sure that everybody is getting what they need from the stuff that you're building. But I'll let someone else talk to
you. One of the things I found is persistence and letting everyone and anyone know what you do to be able to get some volunteer experience. But persistence when everyone keeps on saying no is kind of what helped me land my first job, because a lot of people said no until I found it, till somebody from Craigslist wanted to hire me as an email developer. So persistence pays off.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing I have to add there is don't be afraid to ask questions. A lot of the experience I had was because I was able to go find someone the email community has so many people that are always so willing to answer questions. So just ask.
Yeah, that is fantastic advice. Let's see. We have one more. Fun. I've been in the digital marketing realm for over 20 years, but I never finished my degree. How important is a Bachelor of Science, I think, or a Bachelor of Arts for today's employers? I'll go first. I have a Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science, and that taught me how to write a very long paper, and that's it. So for me, it doesn't do anything, but I'm also not hiring anyone. So I'll pass that over to someone else on the panel to answer.
I guess I'll go again. I don't think it's that important, honestly. I think knowing what you're doing, being able to code is, I think, the most important thing. But I think that there really is, I think, especially in this industry, a whole lot of movement. Like I have a BFA in graphic design, and while that helps me when I was previously working in more Photoshop files, like that was great. But I think that it's kind of more what you do with it and kind of where you take it. So kind of getting out there and kind of proving your chops and figuring out how to do the things that you need to do to advance your career are going to be more important than a degree.
I like that answer. Perfect. That works out well for me. Okay. Well, I want to thank all three of you for taking part in Parcel Unpacked. I appreciate all the time and energy you've put into answering all these questions with me and coming in and sharing your experience in the email world. And it's such a weird world that we're all in, where we've just kind of landed here and we're navigating it, and there's no direct path, it feels like some days, but we're doing it, and we're making better email standards, and we're moving forward, and we're sharing so much knowledge with each other. So thank you to you three for being with us. I appreciate all the time. We